Hey there, everyone. It's been a hot minute since October. Um, I typically don't do as many holiday stories just because holiday times are extremely busy. Working retail, having a young child, I don't have as much time to do reviews and things. So I try to keep them to one a week or so. However, I'm extremely behind this year, being 2 weeks into December already. And if we're being honest, I'm just having a hard time getting into the holiday spirit this year. 2021 feels more emotionally draining than 2020 was, and I don't know why. I don't know if any of you have that issue, but that's where I'm at here. So, um, yeah. However, I am trying something new this year where, with the first story for the holiday romances, I did do at least one live update a day on my Instagram, which is Readhead Mary Lee. Um, so if you want to see live updates for the holiday romances, I'm going to be doing those at least one a day, usually more towards the end of the day, just because I kind of fit reading in sporadically when I can. So, and if that works, then we'll continue with that moving forward. If not, then maybe we'll just make it a holiday thing and just make it how things go. So, that being said, let's get into today's review, which is First Kiss at Christmas by Lee Tobin McLean. So, this is actually a clean romance. It leans towards more being a Christian romance, even though it's not specifically advertised as such. But so this will be going in the clean romance series, and I might do a Christian romance series, but usually the two are merged together. So this will definitely give you some Hallmark movie vibes. That being said, let's get into the actual story. This is the story of Tony and Kayla. Tony is a military veteran whose sister recently passed away, and he now has custody of her 4-year-old son, who is understandably extremely distressed and upset and hurt over losing his mother so close to Christmas time. And they have entered into a program in a small town, and they are staying at what is called Victory House, where people who have, emotional, uh, traumatic issues and experiences can come together to heal as a family. Um, it doesn't really specify what the program is, but it's kind of insinuated that it's for anyone who's gone through traumatic issues. So I'm assuming, people who've gone through domestic violence, people who've had recent deaths in the family, as in this story, or, recent drug abuses. Again, it's not made extremely clear, but that's the impression that I get just from how people have talked in the book about people who've stayed at Victory House. So while they are staying at Victory House, Tony enrolls his nephew at a private preschool, and this is where he meets Kayla, who is his nephew's preschool teacher. And the two, of course, fall in love. Now, while this is a romance for sure, and there's plenty of romantic aspects to it, really the core of the story is healing. Kayla has body issues from when she was younger. She'd had sclerosis, so she has some very severe issues with that fact and feeling not worthy of things. Tony has issues because he feels like he failed his sister, he feels like he failed his nephew, and he's constantly, every time any little thing happens, he feels as though he's continuously failing his sister and nephew. And so he feels like he's not worthy of happiness. There's actually another character who unexpectedly is in the story, and it does kind of tie in a little bit more towards the end. It makes more sense. And she has feelings of not being worthy of love and happiness. So even though it's a romance for one couple, there is the hint of a romance for another couple, and there is definitely a lot of healing for a minimum of 4 characters. And then there's a few other spots here and there where there's smaller instances of like healing or setting probably the groundwork for future stories, because the impression I get is that there's already existing stories for this series, and I'm definitely going to look into those for sure. So Kayla's character, again, she has body issues from the sclerosis, but she also has some issues with the fact that she'd been bullied because of the sclerosis, which obviously feeds into the body issues. But a lot of her story is learning to stand up for herself, to believe in herself, and to do so in a way where she's not giving up her general goodness, like learning to stand up for yourself but still being a good person, learning to put your foot down and draw lines without having to refuse to help if you actually genuinely want to, things like that. So she's a very likable character. She's a very amiable character. And she is definitely the type of person that would bring the little boy, the nephew, Jax, out of his shell, which obviously she does. And that's pretty good. But really, I feel like the main focus for characters is actually Tony. He has some of the more severe feelings of being inadequate and not deserving of love and happiness, because again, he feels like it's his fault that his sister died. They'd had an argument the night that she died, and she had left the home because they shared a home at the time and taken her son with her. So he has extreme feelings of guilt. He has extreme feelings of failure. And he also has the added stress from having custody of a four-year-old little boy who is extremely upset and hurt and doesn't know how to handle his feelings about his mom not being there. He is constantly trying to balance everyone else's feelings while at the same time feeling as though he's not allowed to process his own feelings or even have his own upset and feelings, because according to him, it's all his fault. And he has the most to overcome emotionally, aside from Jax, who's 4. And there's really only so much you can do with a 4-year-old's character to portray grief. But so Tony definitely has the farthest to go, I feel like. There is another character, like I said, I can't get into it too much because it would give away far too much of the story. But her character has to overcome a really terrible, terrible upbringing. She has to completely break this attachment she has to an older man that she has a physical relationship with, even though emotionally it's more of a mentor relationship. And she has to deal with feelings of betrayal and how that affects her and her perspective of herself and how to stand up on her own 2 feet. So there's that aspect as well. And then, of course, there's Jax, who's the 4-year-old little boy who, again, there's only so much you can really write pertaining to a child's grief. I don't think there are very many authors who could adequately portray that. However, it's portrayed very well in this story, but it's not done in a way that is overwhelming for the reader. They bring in parts of grief while at the same time balancing it with something to help Jax learn to cope, and stabilizing forces such as like a new dog that he feels like helps to protect him and helps him to feel less scared. And one of the things I really love about this story is they show you, but there's scenes in there where Tony takes Jax to see his therapist. So at no point in the story is it ever implied that people get over traumas and emotional issues just magically, like with a genie or something. It doesn't happen. It shows you have to put the work in. It shows you have to be willing to try, and how it can be helpful for yourself and for others. So it's a really, really great example, I would say, for people who maybe are going through something. I feel like quite often in books and movies and TV shows that it seems like people get over their grief and emotional issues just kind of like that, like super simple. And that can set up a very false idea of how quickly you should get over something. And this story definitely creates a much better, realistic mindset for that. It's not an unrealistic story. It is to an extent, in that Tony and Kayla fall in love in like 3 months. But it does honor the fact that they fell for each other in 3 months and made it more realistic. Even though he proposes by the end of the story, the epilogue is a year later for their wedding. So it is acknowledging the fact that they still have to learn about each other and things like that. So even though falling in love with someone in 3 months isn't terribly realistic, I feel like it's done in a way that is still respectful of the fact that that's not really how life goes. You know what I mean? So I definitely feel like it's a really good. I would say the one thing that I don't necessarily think is terribly realistic, and I could be wrong because I was not born and raised in a small town. I don't know what small town life is like. But it felt like almost every single person in the community, except for maybe 2 people, are all just automatically accepting and uplifting and compassionate people, even to complete strangers. There's only about 2, maybe, about 2 characters who are just kind of jerks in the story, like straight up jerks that are, in terms of characters that are in the town. But again, that's the part that gives me really the Hallmark movie vibes about it, is because in almost every Hallmark movie, it's a community that all comes together, at the last minute or, cohesively. And again, I've never experienced small town life, so correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to comment. If I'm wrong, put that in there. But to me, as someone who's grown up in the city, it's not terribly realistic. But I feel like, considering how well balanced the story is pertaining to handling people's individual griefs and histories and showing the very real steps people have to go through for grief, that I feel like it's definitely a forgivable factor. It's nothing that's like super major and detracts from the story in any way. It actually helps to enhance it. And I'm kind of thinking maybe it was on purpose. Again, it does. I would say, in terms of stories, this one is the first book I've read that actually made me feel like I was reading a Hallmark movie. So I would not be surprised if Hallmark at some point got the rights for this and turned it into a movie for Christmas. I actually actively hope that they do so. So, this is a story I would pretty much recommend for most anybody. The only major trigger I can think of, and I probably should have said that at the beginning of the review, but I didn't because I am me and I mess up, would be the fact that the sister, when she died, she was murdered. She was flat out murdered in cold blood. And her son saw it. That being said, And there's also an abduction scene that is solved in like a page and a half. So there's, aside from those two things, there isn't really too much of anything that's triggering. There's not like a bunch of violence. There's no cursing that I saw in the story, aside from maybe crap, or damn, which I don't even think there was a damn in there. I think it was just like, there might have been like a crap in there, but I could be wrong. But so there's no cursing. There's no intimate scenes of a carnal nature. There is no violence aside from the murder, which again, you don't actually see that scene. It's referenced later on in conversation, but it's not actually a scene on its own. So the one thing I would say is, if you're someone who does not appreciate Christianity or religion in any way, it might bug you, because being holiday time, there is quite a bit of events that happen at the church in the story, but it's not really like super preachy or anything, if that's something that would worry you. It's definitely just a Christian-based community getting together to do good things for the holidays, and then focusing on this particular story of Kayla, Tony, and Jax. So I would definitely recommend this for almost everybody, unless you are a super hardcore atheist who does not like Christianity at all. I think most people would enjoy this, whether or not they're Christian. Again, there's nothing super offensive in here. I definitely feel like this is a story. If you wanted to do it as like a family story, you could. It's not so heavy on the romance that you couldn't do it as like a family reading time, for sure. There's a lot that a lot of people could get from it. Heck, this would be a story I would even like if you have a daughter or son who's starting to get into romance novels and they're like 10 or older, or maybe, right around that age, they could read this. There's nothing that would be super inappropriate for them at all. So I would definitely recommend this. So if you get a chance, go check out First Kiss at Christmas by Lee Tobin McLean. I look forward to seeing you at the next review, which hopefully should be next week or the end of this week. Probably next week, if we're being honest. But I will do live updates on Instagram starting tomorrow, usually in the evening. So I'll see you all then. Bye-bye.